Hello all, and welcome to this quick session on the difference between components and composites in your subject area. So what we're going to do in this session is I'm very quickly going to give you some of the kind of research behind components and composites, and then Neil's going to look at it in more detail and give you an example about it. So we've talked in our Monday session that we are trying to make an ambitious curriculum for all. And some of those decisions that we make will make our curriculum more accessible and therefore hopefully more ambitious for all students. We want them to delve into our complex and fascinating worlds of each of our subject domains. So if we start just very quickly with our kind of strategic aim. So one of our strategic aims this year is that we're going to make sure that all departments have well-sequenced curriculum that enables students to retain and retrieve the knowledge that they deem to be powerful. So we've spent a great deal of time, I know you have spent a great deal of time deciding what the powerful knowledge in your subject is. So we now need to obviously construct those curriculum that are going to enable students to enter into that powerful knowledge and retain that powerful knowledge. And as we always say, what we're striving for at this school is to make research-informed decisions. We're going to take the research, try and synthesize the research, and then try and apply it into our classrooms. Because we believe that, like any other profession, will make sure that we make better decisions. We wouldn't expect doctors to not be as informed as possible. So as teachers, as a profession, we don't want to be any less informed. So let's start with the concepts of learning, and a lot of what I'm just going to talk about is stuff that we have already done in CPD, so hopefully nothing is particularly new to you here. So learning is a persistent change in long-term memory. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve the long-term memory of students. We are trying to change their ability. It is our job to change the ability of students. It is not just to have them come in and then follow that path depending on what their ability is when they enter. That's just a starting position. And we know a few things about long-term memory. We know that the more we can improve long-term memory, the easier it is for students to learn new information. So we're trying to construct these schema or schemata in the long-term memory. And a schema, if you remember, is a cognitive framework that helps to organize and interpret information. So we've got lots and lots of different schema in our brain relating to various different subjects. Now those schemas, what we want from them is that we want them to be rich in our subject knowledge. So we want to have really thought about what is the powerful knowledge in our subject and what we want to teach them. We want those schemas to be flexible. So if they learn a piece of information, we want them to be able to apply that piece of information into various different settings or various different questions if it's a Key Stage 4. And we want it to be enduring. That means that we want it to last. So if we're going to do that, we've got to create mechanisms to make sure it lasts so we can use it in future. So one of the basics of our program before Christmas was looking at the multi-store model of memory. This is really our starting point. And we know that we've got a distinction between what we call working memory and our long-term memory. And this has implications for how we plan a curriculum because for a number of reasons. One is that our working memory is characterized by a very limited capacity. We know we can only really process about 2 or 3 pieces of information at once. Information is going to decay very quickly. It's going to decay very quickly from our working memory. It's also going to decay very quickly from our long-term memory unless we connect the two, unless we assimilate that information. We can't do anything, sadly, to change the working memory of students. We all come with a kind of preordained working memory. Everyone's got rubbish working memory. So we've talked before saying, oh, I've got a bad short-term memory or bad working memory. Yep, everyone does. But what we can do is obviously we can improve the long-term memory of students, and that's pretty much infinite for most of us. And we know we're going to do that because it will reduce the load on the working memory. So the better we can get that long-term memory, the more complex we can get those schema, the better for students. Now, my implications of the multi-store model of memory for curriculum planning are these are some of the basic things I need to think about. So because of the working limits of working memory, I'm going to have to break information down into components. If we're going to present too much information at once, we know that learners will have cognitive overload, so I'm going to have to think very carefully about that. If we present lots of information that is redundant, again, that's going to overload memory. So I've got to think about the relevance of all the information that I'm going to present. And we know that obviously our long-term memory is our learning support. So we've got to sequence our curriculum carefully because we're trying to connect new pieces of information. And what we already know is going to decide whether we're going to learn the new thing particularly successfully. And lastly, when I'm thinking about components and composites, the other thing I need to probably think about is what we call the curse of knowledge. Now, we as experts in our field have complex schema relating to our subject domain. And that's great because that means obviously we can know the end point. We know what kind of success looks like in our subject. But that does come with a caveat that it could be liable to fall under this kind of curse of knowledge, that we will assume that others know more about our subjects than they actually do. And as a consequence, what we might do is we might fail to break that down enough for our novice learners. And therefore, what we need to do is consciously break down information for novices. We need to be really, really explicit and really, really conscious of how we learnt it originally. And that's really difficult because actually we know too much almost now to actually break things down into a more simplified version.
Hello. As you are undoubtedly aware, a lot of the conversations that we are currently having around aspects of the curricula are couched in a variety of different types of vocabulary, some of it new to us. And composites and components is very much a part of that. Now, Christina Brown's done some really nice work on creating us a glossary of sort of key terms. I think the importance there being that we're all on the same page when it comes to these different words, this different terminology. So we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. Now, a common set of words that we hear around curriculum discussions are composites and components. And that's hopefully what you can see on the screen in front of you now. So composites to me are our big questions that students want to grapple with. These are complex knowledge, complex skills, complex ideas that form part of our curriculum. Now, they might be drawn from your national curriculum statements. They might be the foci of half a term's work, something like that. But ultimately, a big question that you want students to be empowered to grapple with. And to get them there, to get them to the point where they are empowered to look after these composites, we need to break that down into the different components, the building blocks of knowledge and skills, that when they are secure, when we've taught them and retrieved them and checked for knowledge gaps and all that sort of good stuff, they enable students to tackle these more complex ideas, these more complex questions, and they ultimately allow them to answer the big questions. Now, obviously, they're going to have to be carefully sequenced to build towards that composite. And as we'll see in a moment, they are often intimately interlinked, which is also something else we need to consider when we're thinking about our medium-term plans. So if we take this example here, this is one from our friends in Ofsted. And it's the idea of what is needed for a marathon. Now, you've probably got the worst person to talk about marathon running here, because I don't run. That's why I learn to fight. But running a marathon is a composite performance. The actual marathon itself is the answer to a big set of components that have been put together to allow the runner to achieve that. So we've got the composite at the top of the screen there, and then what has been done is it's been broken down into a number of interlinking components. And some of these are obvious, such as actually going out and running before you try a marathon. We're not all Eddie Izzard, who I believe went out and tried and started running marathons, and his doctor asked him if he'd done any training, and his reply was, "I once ran for the bus." If we're sensible, we don't do that. If we're sensible, we go out and we do different types of running. We run at speed, we do hill runs, we do endurance runs, to all build up to that ultimate performance. Now, of course, there are subcomponents to that. For example, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, is the idea of choosing appropriate footwear, choosing the appropriate type of clothing that you are going to wear while you are doing this. So all of these components that might be obvious might be also supported by subcomponents underneath that. Another example, perhaps being maybe less obvious, is the idea of nutrition. And that's obviously a form of knowledge. We need to know about nutrition. But equally, we need to think about things like diet over time in the training months that build up to the marathon, but also race day food. And again, take another pop culture example, 1983, the great punk legend, frontman of The Clash, Joe Strummer, ran the Paris Marathon. And when he was asked about his preparation, his answer was 10 pints the night before. And then he went on to add, "and I don't recommend it." But what we're looking at there is just different ways of pulling apart this massive task and breaking it down into all of its different knowledge, skill components. So the takeaways from this are our curricula are built around several big composites, which will be sequenced logically throughout our schemes of work. And when we're looking at our medium-term plans, they're going to give us the opportunity to break down the composites into their many, many different interconnected components. So I hope that has been useful. I hope it's made some sort of sense. And any questions, ask somebody, probably me, Andrew, Christina. Okay, cool. Bye-bye.